Hi everybody, welcome back to the Gallagher Shot YouTube channel. It is Chris here for episode 2 of our brand new feature, our new weekly feature, which is 5 things we learned, where I will be looking back over the previous Newcastle United game, whether that be home or away fixture, and looking at the key points, the key moments in the game. I might be right, I might be wrong. That is what the comment section is for. So if you disagree, agree, or if you want to add further points to this video, by all means comment. Even better, if you do want to become a subscriber, that means the world to us, helps us out a lot. If you do want to become a member for extra content, such as mini videos like this, it is as little as $2.99 a month. So, let's get straight to it. Point 1, solid in defence. This game compared to the Nottingham Forest game, we saw a chance for our defence to be tested. Some late changes, I would argue. Matt Targett wasn't fit enough to play in the game, so we saw Sven Botman come in. A little bit of debate where Sven was going to be starting, if he was going to be the left back position or centre back alongside Fabian Schär. Obviously, as we saw the game kick off there, it was Dan Burn who sat on the left hand side, so a left back position where Matt Targett should be, and Sven Botman comes in at centre back alongside Fabian. It would have been pretty harsh to put our new signing at left back for his debut start at the club. Of course it would be. But he was there alongside Fabian. Great game across the back four there. Well, back five if you include Nick Pope in there, but we will talk about him in a little bit. You have Kieran Trippier on the right-hand side. Once again, Kieran Trippier doing really well going forward as well. Not just defensive positioning, but going forward, bringing the players like of Almiron, Bruno, Joe, Callum Wilson in the game. Done very similar against Forest. Not as much in the Brighton game, but a solid game from Kieran Trippier. Looking at your two centre-back partnership, this is where going into the next game that Eddie Howe might have a little bit of trouble of who he's going to pick against Manchester City. Sven Botman had a great game, his debut game for Newcastle, and like I said, alongside Fabian Schär, who got that absolute wonder strike last week against Forest. But then you've got Dan Burn on the left-hand side, and he done a decent job. He has played there in the past. I think he played there against Brighton last season, and he has played there for Brighton whilst he was at that club as well. So Eddie Howe has a difficult decision to make now going into the next fixture. Does he stick back with the same back five as what he did against Forest for the opening game of the season? Or does he mix things up a bit? Does one of those centre-backs in Dan Burn or Fabian Schär lose their position for Sven Botman to come in? Does he go 3 centre-backs at the back against Man City to stop their strike force who won 4-0 at the weekend? That's down to Eddie Howe. I can't see him changing formation for the City game. I would like to hope that you would go into that game. I think we can get something from it. It'll be a hard job, of course it will be. But I don't want to see the dynamics and the setup of the team change. So, what do you think? Does Sven Botman come into that start 11? Does he drop back to the bench? God knows. I'm absolutely baffled. I don't know how it's going to go. Point 2. Nick Pope. We've heard Nick Pope's name a lot. We've seen Nick Pope's name a lot over the last 48 hours there, thanks to our friend Toon Pauls and you lot replying to everything with Nick Pope. But he had a great game. Like I mentioned at the very start, this Forest didn't really test that defence last week. Polar opposite against Brighton. Brighton took a little while to get into the game. It was pretty even for the first 30-35 minutes, I would argue. But as the game went on, Brighton did start to control the game and had a hell of a lot more shots on target than what Newcastle did. Pope had made a few decent saves in that game. I think there's 2 or 3 which I can remember off the top of my head. We'll quickly react. There was that one moment where Brighton had the shot and he was beaten. It was Kieran Trippier who was on the line to clear that up. That wasn't great. I don't want to see that Nick Pope again, because if I had it in the back of the net, I probably would have blamed him for that one. But the rest of the game, great. It really was very, very quick. And it's something which will get very similar from De Vavra. Great instinctive shot stopper, really is. But then there's a little bit of a howler in there. I wouldn't have said that if that goal had have gone in with Kieran Trippier wasn't there, it would have been a howler. But like I said, I would have been pointing the finger. But Nick Pope, great game, really, really was good. We've seen Obviously, Nick Pope in the quieter game against Forest, but then we've seen him be tested against Brighton. And once again, going into the Man City game, he is probably going to be our number one choice for goalkeeping options. Point 3. Attackers. So we saw how well our attacking force can work against Forest, and I'm going to keep going back to that Forest game because that's the only really competitive game we'll have something to go off at this moment in time, just 2 games into the season. They look really good and really, really versatile against Forest. Against Brighton, obviously Brighton being a better side and a lot harder to break down, we struggled. We really did struggle going forward. And that wasn't just one single player, that was all of the players involved. Callum Wilson struggled to get into the game. He did have that shot, which did go in. The referee did blow his whistle for high foot. Still arguable if that should have stood, but if it's on the other foot, then I'm probably going to say a free kick as well. So can't get too angry with that one. But those players like Bruno, who's had a great start at Newcastle United, couldn't find his feet in the game against Brighton. I think it was clear that Brighton's game plan was to be very, very fast when Newcastle did start to possess the ball and have possession. They were very quick at closing down Newcastle players, Bruno especially. There was a few times in the centre circle where the attacking options from Brighton just came and nicked that ball from behind Bruno without him even getting a sniff. Really was. Struggled throughout that one. He came out on social media and said that it was far from his best game. Agree, of course. Wasn't a bad game, I would argue, just not to his standard. But Bruno not necessarily being an attacker for Newcastle. You're looking at the likes of Joe Willock, Miguel Almiron, Alan Saint-Maximin, Callum Wilson to provide the attacking influence and options there. Like I said, Callum Wilson, quiet one. If you look over the right-hand side, Miggy didn't really have much involvement, to be honest with you. Quiet game over the other side for Saint. I think we've seen the best and the worst of Saint-Maximin in the last 2 games. He had a very, very good game against Nottingham Forest. But against Brighton, once again, just like Bruno, just too sloppy with the ball, losing the ball very easily. Simple short passes weren't even reaching their players, and there was a few times he went down the wing, which he's fantastic at doing, cut inside and looked at cutting the ball across the edge of the box. Just wasn't finding anybody. The debate is still out about Saint-Maximin. You'll go on social media and you'll see that fans one side of the fence or the other side. There doesn't seem to be equal ground with fans' opinion on Saint-Maximin. Time will tell. It's still a bit early in the season. There's a lot of people saying, sell him, bring somebody else in. Not as easy as that. I think I've mentioned loads of times on this channel, especially on the Always Smiling Faces podcast, which we record on a Monday, that this is a huge season for Alan Saint-Maximin. I think it's a make or break season for him. We were solely relying on him a couple of seasons back before Eddie Howe came in, before the transition of the players arrived. And now he's not the shining jewel in Newcastle's crown. There's many jewels in there now, so he's not the key man anymore. So I don't know. I'm still on the fence with Saint. I'm not at one side or the other. I think he's a good player, but I think he could do better in certain instances. I think that's the best political way to answer that one. To mention Saint not finding players and to mention Bruno losing the ball brings me to point 4. No matter how bad that performance was, I don't think it was a bad performance, but it was compared to the Nottingham Forest game. It was a very average, very forgetful game and performance from Newcastle United player, and that was across the field. I'm not just solely pointing at single players here. I'm looking at a collective, a group of players. It's still a decent point. It's a very good point. If we can go to an away game and perform like that and still come away with a point, so be it. Honestly, so be it. Just last season, at the very start of last season, we would have lost that game by a handful. We really would have. Brighton had plenty of chances. But we stayed pretty solid there at the back, like I mentioned earlier. Brighton did struggle to break us down. Most of their shots were coming from outside the box, really. They were on the edge of the box. It's a very good point. Away games, you're taking a point, of course you are, especially how well they played last week at Brighton and how well we played last week. you saw the slight differences in quality. I would have been annoyed if we had left that game without a point, but I think Brighton, if you're looking at overall, they probably deserved to get all 3 points. They were the team that looked like they were going to win it throughout, like I said, throughout after the 30th minute onwards. So yeah, we're going to rub our hands together, getting a point, a very, very good point, which brings me in to the next point. I like saying point. Point 5, colour clash. A lot of debate going into this game when we found out that Newcastle United were unable to wear any of their 3 kits. So we weren't allowed to wear our home kit, we weren't allowed to wear our white and green kit, or the blue alternative kit. Brighton, by the sounds of it, with Brighton being the home team, they did not want to change their colours. They could have easily went to the away strip, which they have. Then there's no clash, no matter which kit we wear. But they didn't want to do that, and arguably so, first home game of the season, right, it's their decision to make at the end of that. I'm not annoyed at Brighton for doing that. But we had to wear that 4th shirt, which is the training shirt or warm-up shirt or whatever you want to call it. The clubhouse started selling that, of course they have. Sales will go through the roof for that one. But it was all just to stop that colour clash in relation to the shirts which the players were wearing, because it's not necessarily a rule by the Premier League, it's more of a guidelines that anybody watching the game, playing in the game, or refereeing the game, they have to be able to distinguish each side, and each player from each side, and rightly so. I'm not sure that 4th kit distinguished the players. I really don't think it did. Those times that I'm watching that game, and I thought it's a Newcastle player running onto the ball, until, obviously, they start running in a certain direction, and that happened a few times during the game. I'm not sure if any players came out afterwards and said we struggled, but watching it, I'm not sure if you agree, and it's not an excuse because it's for both sides. But for me, I don't think that it really worked. I think if anything, we should have been wearing a white and green shirt. Then, obviously, you don't have the clash of the shorts. I know we wore the black shorts at the weekend there, but I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not sure if it's been an excuse to bring more money into the club, or I'm probably completely wrong with that one. And that's not a dig at the likes of the ownership or anything. But I didn't get it. I really didn't. But the club made a canny killing off that one by the looks of it. Sold out in the club shop, sold out online. What's your opinions on the shirt as well, on that 4th shirt, that silhouette shirt? I'm not too keen on it. We mentioned this last week as well on the channel. I'm not keen of it. I think it's too much happening. If I'd have been more discreet and the silhouette had been less silhouette-y, if that's a word, then I get it. It's a great idea, a great concept. I think it's just delivered very poorly. But yeah, that's it. That's 5 things we learned from that game. Stick around on the Gallagher Shots YouTube channel. We do have plenty more things coming. Like I mentioned earlier, we do the Always Smile on Faces podcast every Monday at night around about 8:15. We go live. You do have extra time along with your match previews, match reactions, and so much more. Fantasy Premier League will be back as well at this point, probably later this evening, where Matty and Dan look at game week 3. It'll be a reaction to game week 2, then obviously what should happen going into game week 3. So if you are a fan of Fantasy Premier League, tune into that one. It's a great show. But yeah, that's me done. Signing out. See you later on. Nick Pope.